Welcome to the Engrafted Word, with a mandate to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, making disciples of all men, teaching them to obey everything Jesus has commanded, preaching righteousness, holiness, and the pursuit of consecration, without which no man shall see the Lord. Presented by Engrafted Word Church. And now, Pastor Christopher McMichael.
You and I can't assume just because it was good yesterday, it's good today. And just because we've been able to walk with something up until today doesn't mean we're going to be able to walk with it tomorrow. You and I have to check in with God every day and be willing to walk away from any business, any major, any university, any mission trip, any assignment. Some of our young people are looking at jobs and they're worried about it. I tell everybody, take the job. You can fix any job with a 2-week notice. Any bad job decision, fix it with a 2-week notice. But you can't be too ashamed to walk away and say, no one in my life feels good about this. None of my prayer feels good about this. All the scriptures I'm reading right now are screaming at me about this. Quit emphasizing everything good beneath the surface when it's what's on top that's going to make you sick as a dog. And you may not recover. You absolutely may not recover. But you can't violate design without consequences. And I pray that if you're forcing a square peg in a round hole, that it starts to scream at you louder and you get terrified. Terror is a good thing to make you stop. Don't make God have to scream at you, though. It means you're still a child. We have to still scream at our children when they're doing something and we don't want them to get hurt. Stop it! But when you get to be adults, you don't do that anymore. Because they're smart enough. You just give them a word. Don't go near there. Don't go over there. That's all I need. So you can't violate design without consequences. All right, that's my exhortation. That's the interpretation of the tongue. That's why I'd rather teach it, because I could say, my children, as the dolphin jumps through the hoops and smiles. He wants you to jump through the right hoops and smile too. It's retarded. But there's been plenty of prophecies that retarded. All right, Mark 3, you there? No, because you're in Proverbs. I said turn to Mark 3. We've been married 17 years, honey. You ought to submit. Find the verse. So I'm going to start a new series. Dr. Cephas is teaching next Sunday. So we're going to talk about the basics. Dr. Barclay harped on that while he was with us. Let me shame some of you for a minute. You had opportunity to be in 3 services with Dr. Barclay. Some of you weren't for whatever lame reason. But I was honored. It is my pastor. Some of you don't even make 3 services a week here. I made 3 services this week with my pastor. I'll be in like another 20 next week with him. But I love to see him minister differently in each of the 3 churches. And to hear each of the pastors say, that's exactly what God's been saying in my church. To hear Pastor Caleb say that, to hear Pastor Luke say that, and to see my pastor's office minister differently everywhere he goes. And for me as a minister, sit back and go, man, he's good. What he's doing here is, oh man, it's good. He harped on us about the basics and not getting bored with the basics. So I figured what we do is just teach on the basics and see how bored you get. Now, when we talk about the basics, I want to come from the perspective of not basic theology, and that's called orthodoxy. Not basic orthodoxy or basic beliefs, but I want to talk about basic orthopraxy, basic Christian practice. What are the basics that you need to do that will give you victory in life? Whatever this exhortation was we just gave, the reason your lights are going on is you're violating orthopraxy somewhere. The system that God established in the kingdom, the way Christians live, is designed to cause you to go from glory to glory. If your life is not going from glory to glory, if someplace in life you're hovering around a dead mountain, you have violated orthopraxy, because orthopraxy has the promise of taking you from glory to glory and from faith to faith. If any areas of your life you're still hovering, beating your head against the wall, at some point you may realize you're in a dead end. And you're not going any further. So it's okay to back up and say, maybe we should reevaluate the nature of our relationship. Maybe we don't need to go together anymore. Maybe we need to terminate this business dealing or whatever it may be. Maybe I need to change majors. I have no peace in this major. Regardless, orthopraxy ensures that you go from Egypt to Sinai Sinai to the promised land without 40 years of wandering in the desert. If they'd have obeyed God from Egypt to the Red Sea to the desert wilderness of sin, wilderness of sin to Sinai, Sinai up to Jordan, and Jordan crossing over at Jericho, they could have done it in 2 or 3 months. Oh, no. They want orthodoxy. Give it to us. We'll take notes. But they didn't want orthopraxy. That's too much. So even with the Israelites, they had perfect orthodoxy written on tables of stone, but they rejected every bit of the orthopraxy. If you want to write down Hebrews 6 gives us the foundational orthodoxy, that is the 6 principles of the doctrines of Christ. We teach on them probably every 2 or 3 years. I'm not going to teach on them anytime soon because there's other things to cover, but you ought to know them pretty well. Hebrews 6 talks about the foundation of repentance of dead works. That's number 1. Faith toward God. That's number 2. Doctrine of baptisms, plural. That's 3. Laying on of hands. That's doctrine 4. Resurrection of the dead. That's doctrine 5. And of eternal judgment. That's doctrine 6. Those are the 6 principal doctrines or orthodoxy of Christ. That's not what I'm talking about. I want to talk about orthopraxy, the things you practice, because it is the basics that will set you up. Wherever you're beating your head against a wall, wherever your warning lights are coming on, it's because you have violated basic practice. And I've come up with a list of about 8 things. We honestly could make it 25 things. We could make it 5 things. But I figured we make it 8. That way we could start to do a series out of it, and every one of us just judge where we're lacking. It's like your vehicle. There's certain things you have to do to maintain your vehicle. You got to rotate tires. You've got to change oil. You have to change filters. It's even good to change windshield wiper blades. Make sure you have windshield wiper fluid. There's basic orthopraxy that you do to ensure the longevity of your vehicle. Change out radiator fluid. Change out transmission fluid. It's basic common sense to guys mostly because we get it. Women aren't so in tune to it. One of my favorite stories was this wealthy lady who, this is 25 years old, she brought in it was a 94 Toyota Supra, which was a really sweet car back then. The new ones are pretty sweet too. And she was having engine problems. The engine locked up. And it was a relatively new car. She had only bought it 2 years prior. So they checked it out. Things were not right. They popped the head off of it, and everything was just solid tar. And they said, "Ma'am, when was the last time you changed the oil?" Had 40,000 miles. She said, "What's an oil change?" Well, something you should do like 20 times between now and back then, or at least 10 times. You can't violate orthopraxy and go on. So it's actually kind of like an idiot bumper. It's an idiot chain. God is so gracious, he doesn't promote you when you don't master the basics. You have to master the basics. So Mark 3 is one of our theme verses. I want to show you a video first. I mentioned this Sunday night with Pastor. So pull it up. Don't start it. It's a judo match. You guys know I used to do judo years ago. And Master Ho? He was a Korean. Ho's not Korean. I can't remember his name. So my first instructor, Mr. Foster, was a tremendous judo player, old school guy, Vietnam vet, and he was friends with a South Korean judo champ who actually had won a silver medal in one of the Olympics in the 60s. And Mr. Foster taught us in judo over and over and over again. He said, don't be in a hurry to learn the next thing. Learn the basics. And he said, the basics are all you need. This is a pagan guy. He actually was a non-believer married to a Mormon. He's a pagan. And he's teaching us simple principles. Learn the basics because everything in judo rises and falls on the basics. And he said, Master, I can't remember the master's name. He said, he won a silver medal with one of the first throws you'll ever learn, like third or fourth throw. And I remember that really sticking with me. So before we hit play here, this is from the Paris Olympics a few weeks ago. The guy in blue is Teddy Rene. He is the French grand champion. The guy in the white is the South Korean defending world champion. This is the gold medal match. This is the 100 kg plus division. So Teddy Rene, the guy in blue, he's a black guy. He's 6'8", 310 pounds. The most decorated judo player in judo history. And he's He's playing the defending world champion from South Korea, whose name escapes me. It's Kim Ung something. It's not Kim Ung Jong, but it's Kim Ung something. He's also 280, 290 pounds. So these guys are unbelievable. This is the gold medal match. And go ahead and hit play. So this throw right here is one of the very first throws you ever learn in judo. And he just won his 3rd Olympic gold medal with it. The announcer says Ashiguruma, and the announcer is a judo player. I think it is not Ashiguruma. I think it's Hirai Goshi, but he's the judo player. I'm not. So only the second guy in judo history to win 3 golds at the Olympics. He just did this. Of course, it doesn't hurt that he's 6'8", 310 pounds. But the guy who beats the world's best with a throw you'd learned the first year you were a judo player. And I like the visual of it because it's so fast, it's so simple. There are 60 plus throws in judo. This is one of the first 8 or 10. It's a testimony to the basics, the basics, the basics. We get drunk on Bible prophecy. We get drunk on prophecy. We get drunk on types and shadows. And that's all great, and it's there to be studied, but what are the basics that you're doing, not just hearing? What are the basics that you're doing? Because what you do, according to James 1, is what's going to bless you. You're there in Mark 3. Let's go to James. Hold your place in Mark 3. Let's just read James 1. James 1 says, "But be ye doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. To be drunk on Scripture and to do nothing is the recipe for delusion." For verse 23, this is James 1:22, 1:23. "For if any man be a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like unto a man beholding his natural face in a mirror. For he beholds himself and goes his way, and straightway forgets what manner of man he was. But whosoever looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues therein, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work," because what you hear always requires a work. "He not being a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deed." So going back to our tongue and interpretation, where you're not blessed at is an area you're failing to do the word. The Bible promises a blessing when you do the word. So wherever you're not blessed, wherever you're pounding your head against the wall, and you can even say, "I'm doing everything I know," that's fine. There's something you obviously are failing to do that you don't know yet. It is worth getting somebody to judge your life, inspect you. Like Pastor just shared with us, you can't watch yourself shoot. So let somebody judge you as you do your life. Let somebody evaluate you and show them how you do it. Don't put on your best airs to be judged. Show them the most natural way you do it. That way they can help you when they're not around. We like to put on airs when we get help. We like to share the details that make us look the best and not the details that make us look the worst. But you can't get help showing what's the best. You can only get help showing what's the worst. It's like if you want somebody to watch you judge how you run like you normal run, like a big old drunk walrus or big old drunk moose. Just run galloping like a big goofball, and they can say, "All right, here's your problem. You look like a moose when you run." Don't put on your best reindeer sprint. Just gallop the big, heavy 100-pound head. We try to put on our best show when we need help. No, put on your worst show. I use the analogy over and over again. When you go to the doctor, tell him everything. How has it been this last year? Bleeding out of 9 holes. Toes look like they're going to fall off. My ear hair has come in like a werewolf. And I've put on 100 pounds. It's like, well, we may need to schedule for a full workup tomorrow because I ain't got time to address all this. Put forth everything that's messed up. We so hurt ourselves trying to be perfect when we know full well we're not. You only get help when you say, "It hurts here. And I've done this to it in the last 5 days." Quit hiding everything when you go to God for help. Come to Him saying, "Lord, it's not working. Lord, I'm frustrated. Lord, I want to murder somebody. Lord, my parents feel like they're against me. Father, it feels like the church is against me. Lord, it feels like you're against me." Bring it out to Him. Be honest with what you want and see what the Lord says to you about it. So now you're back to Mark 3. Let me give you 10, we'll start with 8. And maybe between now and my travels, I'll come up with the last 2. I think 8 will be sufficient. We're going to give you a list of 8, and we're going to start with number 1. because it won't be difficult. None of this is heavy. We just can't get bored with it. Just remember a 6'8", 310-pound judo player named Teddy Rene. They call him the Big Teddy Bear. He won gold. He's won 3 golds. He's the most decorated judoka in history with the basics. And you don't get bored with the basics, especially if it keeps winning you gold medals. 60 plus throws in judo now, 40 originally, but 60 plus. You just need about the first 8 or 10, and you can take it to the grand championship. Why worry about throw number 57? I don't know anybody who even knows what that throw is because it's so high up there. Well, who cares? The first 10 are so devastating. Let's just get really good at them. How about we get really good at 8 basics? I guarantee you, with these 8, and there's nothing heavy here, it's going to troubleshoot some place where your life is failing because it's your fault. It's that simple. So let me give you 10, then Mark 3 will be our first verse for point number 1. Point number 1, 8. We're saying 8 basics, not 10. Let me cross up my notes here. 8 basics to do, not just believe. Number 1, walk with Jesus. So simple. That'll be the subject of the rest of our sermon here in 2 or 3 minutes. Number 1, just walk with Jesus. That's where it all starts. The rest of these don't necessarily have an order of importance, but number 1 is pretty much walk with Jesus, because all the others won't work if you don't walk with Jesus. And that's something you can do on your own. And if you're not doing it on your own, that's where you're failing. Number 2, church attendance. This is also important. If you walk with Jesus, you'll end up in the local church, because the local church is where Jesus has his kids. Number 3, some of you fail this one pretty radically. Fellowship with the saints. Have friends outside for sure, because you got to win them to Christ, but you have to fellowship with the saints. Nobody in here is more spiritual or holier than the other. We're all pretty equal. There are people who have their life together, and if they really have their life together, they don't care how you are. Get around the higher ups, if you will, so you can see how to come up. I hate to keep bringing it back to judo, but we're there. In judo, if you want to get better, you play with the guys that can destroy you. You don't play with the guys that you can beat up on. You play with the guys that are better than you. That's how you get better. You play up. So when you want to come up as a Christian, fellowship up. And some of you don't, for whatever weird reason. You don't fellowship up, you fellowship down into the world. And maybe it's because you don't want to come up. And there's another problem you have. When you don't want to come up, nothing in your life will. You'll always be robbing Peter to pay Paul, working your finger to the bone, never having enough, never prospering, marital problems, health problems, money problems, kid problems, because you don't fellowship with the body that's designed to bring you up. Point number 4, giving. This is an orthopraxy. 8 critical Christian practices. Number 5, evangelism, sharing your faith. It doesn't mean you have to go out with us or with the church, but it ought to be part of your personal life regularly. Talking to people, chatting folks up, always finding somebody to talk about something with. I like to talk to people about their injuries or whatever sports gear they're wearing. That's usually a pretty good opening. Ladies, as long as they're not my age or younger, I usually chat them up about their jewelry because I can usually spot what they're wearing, and every woman wears jewelry for it to be seen. So I say, what's that? Is that a tanzanite? Is that monzonite? Is that mother of pearl? What are you wearing? And then all of a sudden, any guard drops. We can start talking. I start trying to find a way to work the gospel in. Well, that's pretty cool. Who gave that to you? Oh, you guys go to church? Try to work it in there one way or another. 6, serving in the local church. That's a basic. Certain things you'll never learn unless you work for the kingdom. 7, make disciples. I was asking Dr. Barclay, I said, Pastor, and maybe he covered it a little bit. I don't know, I've spent a lot of time with him lately. Pastor, I can't turn my teaching gift on, and I know it's not helping my church anymore. I said, they're calorically fat on the word, and I'm trying to figure out how to shut it off so that, I don't know, they just tuned me out. And he stopped me and said, that's not your problem, son, that's theirs. That's their problem. If they've tuned you out, that's their sin. He said they would help themselves if they'd get out and teach somebody else what you taught them. But you know, we're busy. We got 9 football games to watch every weekend. And then we got our kids involved in another 30. So we don't have time to actually disciple anybody. So right there, we're violating the Great Commission. The last commandment of Christ on earth. We don't even do it. But we'll take notes. And some of you have more doctrine than the rest of the world will ever know, and you do jack squat with it. And you should be pulling somebody under your wing at work, in your classroom, in the laboratory, have a lunch, take them out to lunch. Say, listen, now I'm buying your lunch. Let me teach you something. And just teach them a Bible lesson just to burn the calories off. Because the only way for me to dial back my calorie output here is to not be here. And that's about to start happening a lot, which means you guys are going to have to step it up. And you got to make disciples. Brother Wigglesworth said, the only thing that matters in heaven is the people you take with you. So how many have you taken with you? That comes back to evangelism, making disciples. And point number 8, which we'll stop with our short list right now, is submission. Submission is a practice. Submit to the elders. Submit to those that have the rule over you. Submit to your mom and dad. If your mom and dad don't feel good about something, trust that. Trust that. I'm a father of girls, and I was explaining this to somebody. I said, look, here's how it works. When you're married, your wife looks at you one day and says, I want a baby. Okay, now. All right, it's going to be at least 9 months. Like, if we go now, it's going to be at least 9 months. So that woman's thing kicks off on the inside of her that God gave her. And now you spend 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year believing God for that baby. Some people, 10 years. And then they have to adopt. It's a fight to have a baby. And then God gives you a little girl, in my case, Lydia. And you got to believe God for a healthy pregnancy and all the emotional ups and downs that come with pregnancy, especially your first one. Baby's not moving. Baby's moving too much. I'm spotting. What's going on? And there's all this emotional up and down. And so from the get-go, you're invested in this child. And then the child pregnancy, delivery comes, and you got to believe God, mama doesn't die. And baby doesn't die. Even for all of our technology, we lose both today. And then you got to believe God that you can actually get them through childhood and then you not kill them. Give them up for adoption or just give them away like a box of puppies at Walmart or something. And then you're investing in them, praying over them. Every day you pray over them. Every day you Bible study with them and you teach them and you invest in them and you watch them and you guide them. And so that by the time they're ready to court or some guy's ready to court them, you've got 20, 22, 24 years heavily invested. And here comes some schmo, some schmuck who thinks with his penis. He doesn't know her middle name. And he wasn't there when I believed God for her. And he wasn't there when I discipled her. He wasn't there when I interceded for her. He wasn't there for all the Bible studies and all the studies we did in Mama's investments and all the time we corrected and prayed and taught and corrected and prayed. He just wants to come and whisk her away. He doesn't deserve her. He hasn't earned her. He knows nothing. So, yeah, dads are going to be very protective because they're way smarter than schmo. Way smarter than schmo. And they love the girl way more than schmo ever could. And they, in the first 24 years, have made more sacrifices for her than he'll make in the next 50 years of his life. So he has every right to be protective. And he has every right to pray and intercede and say, I'm sorry, son, you're not good enough and you never will be. So move along. That's how it works. And then you have a boy, you spend the first 10 years just keeping him alive, teaching him that that's not edible, that won't burn, that will burn, stop. And then you got to teach him how to treat his mother because that's how he's going to treat his wife one day. There's a lot to it. So we want to make sure that you stay submitted. And if you're going to court a girl, you better be submitted to her daddy, because that's going to be your father-in-law. You better find his heart. You better ask him about his daughter. A lot of these guys today, even our church guys, shallow schmucks. Shallow. They don't have to be, but they just think with their penis, especially if they fed porn. You know, you heard of corn-fed? We got a whole generation that's porn-fed. And a porn-fed man doesn't know anything about a woman. He knows a lot about a demon, but he doesn't know anything about a woman. And what it's going to take to be a husband to that woman and care for her as Christ loves the church. So you got to be submitted. You got to be submitted to your parents, submitted to those that have the rule over you, submit to your boss. The boss is the one who has to answer for everything. Submit to the police. They want to go home too. What's so hard with just rolling down your window and saying, yes, sir? What is so hard? What is so hard? We all know how it works. I don't care if you're guilty for driving black. I've been guilty for speeding white. It's a random draw. You never know who's going to walk up. You just roll down that window. Yes, sir. Do you know how fast you're going? No, let me know how fast was I going. I'm sure you're going to tell me. And just, how about some yes, sir, and no, sir? And it'll go well with your soul. Just submit. It will go well with your soul. But that's a practice too. Now back to Mark 3, because my preaching time, we got just a little bit left, and these are the basics. Mark 3, your first orthopraxy, the first practice is to fellowship with Jesus. God's been harping on us about that in this church. One of the weaknesses of a teaching gift is you're well fed, which deceives you into thinking you're right with God. You can be well fed by mama and still hate her. You can be well fed at daddy's table and still have no fellowship with your dad. And you can be well fed in the house of God and have no private fellowship with your Jesus. So you have to have both. Thank God all of our ministers here are tremendous teachers. Everybody that fills the pulpit here in-house does a fantastic job. But that doesn't mean you walk with God on your own. So the most important basic to practice is fellowshipping with Jesus. Mark chapter 3, verse 13. And Jesus goeth up into a mountain and called unto him whom he would, and they came unto him. Now there was a large discipleship group at this point, but he only selected 12. And they came up, so now we have a special selection. Just like the church. There's a lot of people on the earth today, but the church are the called out ones. Verse 14, and he ordained 12. Now here's the ordination, first and foremost, that they should be with him. That is every believer's number one calling, to be with Jesus. Everything else that we do extends out of that. Any success we have extends out of that. Any failure we have comes because we weren't in that. Our number one calling, our number one ordination, we are ordained, we're authorized to be with Jesus.
Thank you for joining us today. We trust that the preaching has been a delight and blessing to your soul. Be sure to join us every Sunday and every Wednesday at 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. for the preaching of God's Word. For more information, contact our website at www.engraftedword.org.